Hey everyone, I want to say thank you so much for joining us for the third FreeFuse sessions. I am here with Karen Chaston from the Chaston Center, a good friend of mine, and someone who I have learned quite a bit about regarding emotions, relationships in the workplace, and she does some fantastic work with the component of loss in our lives. So without further ado, I have so many questions for you, but I am so excited to introduce Karen Chaston.
Hi, Mike. And yes, we are good friends. And it's amazing how quickly we have become friends. And I really do enjoy talking to you. So let's see where we go today.
Well, that's lovely. And, I very much appreciate always, good conversation with you. I always feel, a good spirited, way that we are able to interact with each other. So, of course, I have always said when I first heard your story, you have one of the most powerful stories that I think I've actually come across during my time of, sort of talking to folks and, hearing about why they do what they do today. So I'd love for you to provide us with a background from where you are, where you were before, and how you got to where you are today, especially as it pertains to the work you do with Beyond Loss.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Mike. So I guess we've got to go back to 2011 is probably the best place to start, though we will go a little bit further back in the conversation. So in 2011, I was a CFO of a publicly listed company here in Australia. And I was really good at my job. If anyone looked at me, they'd say, oh, wow, look how successful Karen is. She got the career, the salary, the house, the cars, the overseas trips, yada, 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 the family, everything. But I was dying inside and I didn't even realize it, because when I would have those feelings of unfulfillment, I would, just sort of push them to the side. And that's how everyone feels when they're working this much. And that's what happens when you have this powerful job and all that sort of stuff. But it's not the case. I found out many years later. So on the 10th of July, 2011, my husband and I thought we were going to have a lazy day at home. But within minutes of waking up, I was running out the back door, looking at my 27-year-old son, Dan, lying there in the fetal position. And we thought he was unconscious. He had saliva coming out of his mouth. So we thought, oh, well, he's unconscious. And he did have a habit of drinking way too much. And so we sort of tried to wake him, and then we called the paramedics. And then within moments of them arriving, they said those words that no mother, no parent ever wants to hear. I'm sorry, madam. He is dead and probably has been for several hours. So as you can imagine, that was the last thing we expected. We thought a healthy 27-year-old had gone out the night before. But it took us a long time to actually learn exactly what did happen to Dan. And yes, he had drunk way too much that evening, but when he came home, he stumbled because for some reason he'd gone out separately from his girlfriend and he'd left his key at home. So when he bent down to pick up the key that she left out for him, he fell over and he couldn't catch his breath. So it was his lungs that failed him, which was horrible. But me, being my corporate, tough self, and it's surprising, when I called people on that day, I called my boss and I called my former boss actually as well. He'd only left 6 months before. And he said, you're tough, Karen. You're so strong. You'll do it. And I was like, but what if I don't want to do it? And that's what people don't realize is the things that they say at those times, they think that they're lifting you up, but they're not always. So the day after Dan's funeral, I went back to work, eating more, drinking more, and working even harder. Now, if you have a look at these two photos of me, that's my 2007 passport photo and my 2017 passport photo. And the one on the left is 2007. I know I look 10 years younger in the one on the right. But if you look at the one on the left, you can clearly see that was taken 4 years before Dan passed. So you can clearly see how unfulfilled I was. I Went to have my passport photo taken. My lipstick isn't even on properly. I look masculine. I'm carrying more weight. But look at my eyes, because the eyes really do tell that story. Because when you look at them, it really does look like Karen has left the building. And you can clearly see just how disconnected I am. And I want you to do yourself a favor and walk around your office and have a really good look, because you will see men and women who look exactly like I did then. They've lost their soul. They've lost who they are, but they don't even realize it, because they're probably thinking just like I did. Well, that's what happens when you have this job. That's what happens when you have this salary. That's what it is expected. But is it? So as I said, I returned to work, and then 15 months after Dan's passing, the company that I was working for was merging with another. It was two publicly listed companies that were coming together. And in that merger process, they said to me, Karen, you are not going to be the CFO in the new company, but we want you to come with us. We want you to do everything you're doing now, but more. We really love you. And I went, yeah, okay. I don't really care what my title is. And then they gave me my contract, and they did the best favor they could ever do to me. I am so grateful for them. In the contract, I quickly flipped to the salary page, and it was 2/3 of what my current salary was. And I sarcastically said to them, I can't do this job part-time. What are you talking about? And they said, we've never really liked your sense of humor, Karen. And it's a full-time job, and that's the salary, and we've researched it, and that's what it's worth. So I chose redundancy, and that's when I knew that I wasn't going to be an accountant, a CFO anymore. I just knew that I was going to be doing something different, had no idea what I was going to do. And then life just took me on a journey where I became a life coach, where I started to really deep dive into women, to understand women, and to understand, why do women take on masculine traits in the corporate life? Why don't they stay true to who they are? And the more that I deep dived into that, the more I started to transform, which you can clearly see in those photos. And all it was is because I started to deep dive into me. I started to love who I am. And then the journey took me to deep diving into loss, because I knew that I did loss the hard way. And there's over 40 different types of loss events. And, just in that couple of years, loss of a son, loss of my job, and the biggest major loss was when I actually left my corporate role. I looked in the mirror and I went, who are you? And loss of identity is the number one loss that most of us will have. And we never even know about it.
That story is, every time I hear it, and I've heard it, I think, a couple times now, and every time I hear it, it's incredibly powerful. And one of the things that always strikes me is there's a few things I think that are the larger, more, fundamental pieces. There was the element of losing a piece of yourself, losing the element of identity. And the second part was, what were the decisions that you made when you sort of lost that element of identity, right? And I really think that sometimes we have so many decisions that I feel like sometimes that we make in a day that are, people feel like are inconsequential, but they really do reinforce who we are, right? And it's interesting to think about, if you lose your identity, then you also then start making decisions that aren't aligned with who you were before. And now there are, these elements of you might be much less healthy. You might feel that you're unable to do things that you previously were able to do. And what I find always so inspiring is the part where you get to the denouement, right? The part where you're offered this 2/3 salary, right? And a lot of people, I feel like in your position, maybe at that point, and maybe I don't want to say a lot of people, but they might take that as, it's just another thing in my life. My life is just, in this bad place. But you took it and you were able to transform almost the meaning of it to be this really positive new change that you are now experiencing today. And I think that that's one of the most powerful parts of this story. And I think for folks who might be, dealing with things in their outside world, or even maybe dealing things with the workplace, in your mind, was it a challenging thing to almost redefine what would traditionally be a bad moment and redefine it as something that you felt like was a powerful new voyage, a new journey you set into something, for yourself?
I, even though I was very disconnected from myself, I always had this spiritual side of me, and I always had these guts, and I would, I'd have this little voice that I knew wasn't my thinking that would say things to me. And, over through my career, the job before that one, an incident happened, and I said to my boss, look at it this way. And she goes, what? That's so far out there. 2 days later, she walks into my office and she goes, I can't believe you were right, sort of thing. But so I always had that inner knowing. And I knew that if I took that job, it would have eaten me from the inside out. I would have felt that I was sitting there being used. They were laughing at me. And I knew that my work ethics would not have allowed me just to slide along, like just to do the minimum. I knew I couldn't do that. And I also knew that my relationships were just sort of there. I was always angry. Like, I am never angry now. Very rarely do I get angry. So I knew that it was the best thing for me. And I very quickly refocused it and looked at the positive. And, I've had my values sort of done through Gallup. And one of my top values is, or strengths it is positivity. That's the number one. And I always wish that I had done it when I'd been in my corporate, because I know that it would have come out differently. But it was a really easy decision once I knew it was going to eat me from the inside out. So we live in a world of duality, and we always get to choose which way we look at things. Most people go to the negative because that keeps you small, and then you can go into blame. It's not my fault. They were merging with a new company. It wasn't my fault. It was, and it was there was Chinese buyers that were part of the consortium that were buying, and they didn't like the fact that there was a strong, really short, I'm only 5'1", so a really short woman with a powerful voice was actually telling them, no, this is a better way. And it's just that I knew that they preferred a man in that job. And I was at an age, I was 54, 55, and I was at an age where I was literally going, I'm over working where men take the salary, take the credit for my work. I've been at the top of my game in this company. I've had a voice. I've been in the boardroom. I'm not about to step back and lose that. I'll go somewhere else. So it was an easy decision.
And something that I'd like to add that I've learned from you specifically is, you have this, course called the Emotional Best Friend, and in the sort of lower emotional states, right? We have angst, we have blame, we have all sorts of things that aren't, are classified as not being great, right?
Yeah.
And one of the things that I've noticed is, and this is some, thing that I've actually heard from a few other folks as well. We like lower energy states because they're easy, right? Mm-hmm. It's easy to continue throwing yourself a pity party, right? It's easy to think of what you're doing as, not good enough. So it allows you to kind of just say, oh, well, I guess I was never meant to do that. And so, I can continue living on the same life, right? And what's interesting is you mentioned this inner voice in your head, right? And what I find fascinating is a lot of people utilize that inner voice as a compass, but not a lot of people realize you can actually sort of, feed yourself better, more positive thoughts, and your compass, quote unquote, changes, right? So I've always found that to be such an interesting thing. And it's why, like, I appreciate the way that you've approached the Emotional Best Friend course material that you've provided to folks, because you're taking them from a low energy state and helping them ladder up to a much more productive, much more positive place, that they're not necessarily sitting there and thinking to themselves, this is the end all be all, this is who I am. And I think that when we start saying I am X about things that are not positive, then we find ourselves in a place that's just not as constructive as it possibly could be. And so that's what I've always appreciated about your work.
Thank you. Thank you. You know what? I had a realization when you said that there, Mike. So thank you for that. When you said you had that inner voice in your head, because I've always found it really hard to describe to people what that is. It's actually not in your head. It's actually in your heart. It actually comes from your heart, and it sort of is in all of your body. And that's the difference. It's not a thinking thought. It's more of a feeling thought. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. It is definitely a feeling thought.
Yeah, wow. So thank you. You found the words for me to be able to describe that more easily to people. You know, how do you know the difference between your own thoughts and this, you know, thought from everywhere else? But that's what it is. So thank you.
Well, you know, what's interesting that I've always found is there are a lot of people almost call them like, you know, kind of our everyday. And I always thought that this was a funny description because it's kind of dramatic, but it's like our everyday collisions with life. And I
Yeah.
was like, interesting, you know,
The word collisions is negative, but anyway, keep going.
yeah. And I was like, oh, okay, cool. And, you know, this person who was describing it to me was like, yeah, it's kind of like an everyday collision with life. And, you know, you have things that are, you know, sort of more on the, hey, this is just a normal thing. I bump into someone and
Yeah.
that whole analogy. And then they're like, well, then there's things that obviously don't happen as often, but they're incredibly powerful, whether that's, you know, you meet someone, you know, you meet someone nice that you happen to run into at a work event, or maybe you meet someone, you know, somewhere else, or maybe something, you know, what, you know, terrible happens or whatever. You know, there's all kinds of spectrums to it, right? And
Yeah.
I think that there is a certain sense of trying to figure out how do we process those things, right? And I think the first portion of finding, you know, a healthy resolve is to understand how we process a situation. What is our first emotion? And what I found interesting about what you said previously about I don't, you know, I don't get angry about things. There's people who their immediate in instance of anything is anger. Like, oh,
Yeah.
someone said something wrong to me, I am immediately going to be angry. Someone said this, I'm immediately going to be sad. And it's just such a fascinating thing that we as humans have this instant reactionary item, no matter what it is, that for lack of a better word, almost controls us sometimes.
Yeah, it
You know,
totally controls us. First of all, I would change, what was the word you said, accidents or
collisions.
collisions? I'd change that to synchronicities or coincidences, because there are no coincidences in life. And I totally agree. Now, anger is very, very low, very, very low in the emotional vibrational scale. And it's really taxing on your body, right? And being in those lower states, yes, it is easier, but what you're doing is actually you're creating disease in your body, because we are designed to live our life with ease. And because we're stuck in those lower things and not learning from them and not growing and not moving up that vibrational scale to love, joy, fulfillment, enlightenment, that's what brings disease into our body. So when you understand that, that's where it's like, okay, I need to understand this anger. I need to deep dive into it. And one of the first things that people can do is actually go, where do I feel it in my body? Because our body talks to us. So where it comes into our bodies, and more than likely to be, you know, along our organs somewhere, it will give you an indication of what requires healing. And then it's really interesting to look at your anger and go, so if Mary Jo said that to me, I wouldn't be angry. But the fact that Fred said it to me, I'm angry. So what is the difference? What brought up that anger? What is it that about that person that makes you angry? Because we reflect each other, and we normally reflect our shadow side, and we don't like to look at our shadow side very often. So, yeah.
Yeah, no, and definitely. And you know, it's something that we've really noticed even you know, through some of the content that folks are making on FreeFuse right now is workplace interactions, right? And one of the things that folks are trying to figure out is, how do we have a positive workplace interaction for things that are not so positive, right? Like, how do we have to deal with a performance review? And someone actually created a whole list of choices and scenarios to work through, so they could almost progress through a much more positive type of workplace review, even though this person might have different communication style to you, or maybe there's like things that you have to cover in this that are not necessarily as easy as simply like, hey, you did a great job, all right, great, I'll see you in like next quarter, right? And so what I found is, when we're able to really kind of like rehearse some of those things, before they happen, it does give us a little bit of basis to not just immediately react with what we naturally think is going to be the right answer. So that's why I feel like sometimes that element of being able to rehearse something beforehand, I feel like can generate a lot of power. Everything from, hey, I want to learn how to actually build proper relationships with people, whether it's remote or whether it's in the workplace in person, all the way up to, how do I have a crucial conversation with somebody in a boardroom? I think that a lot of folks could benefit from maybe perhaps integrating programs that help them rehearse these things, and not just at a practical, here's what you do, but an actual emotional level to say, how are you feeling at this time? And what is your natural inclination? Are you mad and you're going to go do something that you regret later? Or are you, sad and you just keep it in and now you're, medicating in some way? So I think that those are all excellent elements to building up a more healthy place of work.
I totally agree. It's funny you said, are you medicating? I always like the saying, meditate instead of medicate. And it really does make such a difference. But there's a few things in what you said. And I found a really great thing is for you to actually visualize the conversation. In the morning or the night before, actually walk yourself through the conversation and go into all the different scenarios that could possibly come up. And then you're prepared. You're prepared for their reaction to this or that or whatever. But a better step is my People and Profits Connection program. And that has got 3 factors in it. And the first factor is the you factor, right? Because everything begins with you, okay? Or me in my case. And the fact that you haven't probably deep dived into you and figured out all of the things that have happened in your life, the reason why you have raised, emotions, you probably don't understand your own emotions. And how can you understand anyone else's if you don't understand your own? So the more that you deep dive into you, and in the you factor, in the People and Profits Connection program, we deep dive into 9 areas of life, which is in the Chaston Center model, so that we really understand where we are now and where we would like to be, and how to close that gap so that we become that person. And of course, when we become that person, we do the exercise again, and we always keep up leveling. But once you understand yourself, you really can then really start to understand other people, which is the second factor, the know, like, and trust factor. And it's not a marketing ploy. It is a let's all get to know, like, and trust everyone in this organization. And that's what creates a team dynamic. And what happens when you first of all understand yourself, you then start to see people differently. You start to see they've had challenges in their life because I've had challenges in my life. And you change the question from what's wrong with you to what's happened to you. So you really start to understand this person. And then the third factor is the resilience factor, because once you understand all of that, then you can build resilience. So then what happens with these reviews, they don't become quarterly reviews, they become daily reviews. Walking up to someone, how are you? What's going on? How can I assist you? How can I make your life easier? So that you're always on top of it. And the people, because they know, like, and trust you, will be honest with you. They will tell you, do you know what? This procedure isn't working. It's taking me all day to do this. If we looked at a better way, I'm sure it could be done in 10 minutes. And so there you're getting that interaction. You're actually building that best possible company. But more importantly, because the people all understand each other, they are providing the best possible customer service, building that amazing company. And of course, you're going to get these returns to the company that far exceed any expectation you've ever had.
I gotta say, I love that system, right? And you know, it really is kind of like sad. I feel like is I have some people who I know as acquaintances, not really people I know very well, and obviously not to name any names, but I've seen some work environments that I feel like just don't encourage that kind of thing, right?
No.
And you know, I mean, obviously there is the challenge of remote. You know, we are a remote first company, and I try to really do my best to foster this, you know, sort of connectedness that we all have, ways that we can all support each other. You know, even, you know, this year I was trying to just institute like, hey, if you haven't talked to somebody this week, or, you know, maybe even if you want to talk to them even more than that, why don't we just encourage like just 15-20 minutes, just have a conversation with somebody. How are you doing? You know, how is life? What can we, you know, what can I do to help you in some way? And I feel like there's sometimes this attitude where people are expected to perform, and they're expected to perform like cogs in a machine rather than human beings. And we, you know, sometimes folks who are in leadership positions just say, just do it. I just told you to do it. Don't, you know, like do anything else that I didn't tell you to do. And, you know, they yell at you. They tell you that you're below what you think that you're worth. And you know, people are wondering why folks churn out of their company when they act like that, right? And it's
Yeah.
even just as simple as building a system like what you said that can just really help people with workplace, you know, mental safety, right? And
Yeah.
things that we feel like we actually care for one another. And I would argue that, you know, that attitude is going to always contribute to a better bottom line, even if that's all you cared about, right?
Yeah. It
It's
certainly will. It has to. So you think about it, right? It begins with the you factor. So for decades, probably even for centuries, leave yourself at the door, just bring your professional self in and pick yourself up as you leave. That's been the attitude of most leaders, and they're expected to do the same. So as I said, in the Chaston Model Center, our wellness wheel, we have 9 areas of life. So you're actually asked to leave 89% of yourself at the door. Just bring that 11% in, just be your professional self all day long. And then when you go out, pick yourself up. So no wonder we're all disconnected. No wonder we're not connected to anyone else. No wonder we're always watching our backs, because people don't have our backs. Whereas in that people and profits connection, you clearly know who you are. You know where you're going. You begin to know who everyone else is in the organization. You begin to understand how their role fits into the cog of the whole company. You start to value their role, because you can clearly see that without their portion, it's not going to flow properly. And that's where you create that amazing environment where people are actually rocking up and they're doing their work. You know, you look at Gallup surveys, they've been doing them, I think since 2000. And they have clearly shown that on average, it was around 30% worldwide of all workplaces, only 30% are engaged, right? So that's 70% are disengaged. The 2022 stats showed that only 21% were engaged, right? So that's 79% worldwide of all people. That equates to like, 4 billion people worldwide are disengaged. And you just go, why? And why are they continually churning out this old leadership style? And all they're doing is bringing in people, educating them, having them do their job, burn them out and let them go. And the problem is they take so much IP with them, and it takes a long time to rebuild up that IP. So you are wasting so much money, whereas it's so easy just to follow that simple set. Allow the 100% of the person to come into the workplace, and guess what? They'll actually love the company. They will understand your values. They'll understand your vision. They will be part of it. They will be proactive, and really will start to see such a difference in your workplace. And it's so simple.
Yeah, absolutely. And those are fantastic insights, right? Leaving 89% of
I
yourself in
know.
the door. that
I
is quite the image, right?
you can
Like,
tell I'm an accountant, can't you? Got to bring the numbers in.
well, I think that'll obviously, I think that'll actually provide some folks with a good visual, right? I know that the minute I thought about it, I was like, wow, like only
Yeah.
11% of us actually gets to be here, right? So,
Yeah.
and I've always, I always like looking at things, through a number lens, being like a former engineer myself, and kind of conceptualizing the world through models and numbers. But it's funny to look at it in an analogy like that, where we can say, well, look, like you're clearly not doing this in the way that's constructive, because you're leaving so much of yourself in this place. And I just feel like when we aren't providing that truth to ourselves, right, that's when we really run into this place of, this place of, I wouldn't want to say self-loathing, but it's almost like a place where we don't feel fulfilled.
That's it.
The last conversation I had was about meaningful work, and I think that that's when work stops becoming meaningful. We
Yeah.
steadily and steadily just continue moving towards that. And emotionally, it's kind of similar to the subject that you've really touched on a lot, which is in talks we've had previously about avoidance, right? And I
Yeah.
feel that the element of avoidance there, people will not be bought in. They'll avoid doing more and more work. They'll avoid really being associated with the other people, because there's just so much friction against what they are and who they are, and the workplace not being a sense of expression towards that. And I think that
No.
that's really where people are leaving things on the table, when they just don't let people be who they want to be and uniquely them, and allowing them to uniquely tackle the problems that they have on their day to day, or whatever they were tasked to do at work. So
Yeah.
I think that's brilliant.
Yeah, no, avoidance is huge. And we have created a world of avoidance behaviors, excess food, alcohol, drugs, working too much, exercising too much, anger, isolation. They're all avoidance tactics. I know, I have this very close relative. I won't name who he is. His anger you'll ask him a question, he will go to anger to shut you down because he doesn't want to answer it. Avoidance. That's all it is avoidance.
Mm-hmm.
And it's very, very frustrating, especially when you're aware of it. And the more you talk about it, the angrier and angrier he gets, sort of thing. But there's also, like things like social media, Netflix, TV, avoidance. And sure, there is always a place for them. But when you are sitting in those lower emotions and sitting on the couch and justifying why you are sitting there because the world is against you and all those sort of things, sure, you can justify it, but really, are you living your life? You're in avoidance. And look at retail therapy, right? Shopping, we even call it therapy, and it's avoidance. Spending way too much money is avoidance. And it's understanding that when people are disconnected, they will go more into their avoidance habits, and then it becomes a spiral effect. I think I drank way too much when I was in my corporate career, and it started off as here and there and everything, and then it became a daily thing. Then it became, Monday morning, my husband and I would say, right, we're not drinking this week. Monday night, I'd rock up with a bottle of wine because of the day that I had. So it was also my karma thing, but I wasn't receiving the benefits from it that I thought I did. I stopped drinking in 2018. I decided 2019 would be my alcohol-free year. And I did it with ease, and I never missed it. I never craved it. I still socialized. I didn't avoid that because people were drinking. I have no problem with people drinking around me. So I thought, well, why would I take it back up? I haven't missed it. I'm healthier for it. I'm more alive. And that's what people don't go, because a lot of the avoidance behaviors are socially accepted. They don't see it as an avoidance tactic. Oh, that's just the way we are in Australia and America. We all just go out to have drinks, to have fun with our friends. And you just go, It gets to a stage where you are actually avoiding living and loving your life.
Yeah. And, I totally see that. And it's so interesting to see how it's almost been baked into a level of the culture, right? And
totally. That's the way
yeah.
they control us, though, Mike. It's the way it's like if you're all drunk, or you're all, in this sort of whatever, we can do whatever you want because you won't notice.
Absolutely. Well, I have to say, there has been so much we've been able to chat about, during the course of this FreeFuse session interview here. And I just want to say there's obviously so much that I think folks can learn from you and, find all of your fantastic materials, everything from what's on the Chaston Center to, of course, the community that you're building on FreeFuse as well. And then on top of that, any materials that they can find of you on LinkedIn. But I did want to just give you a moment to obviously share anything that you wanted to share, perhaps any calls to action or anything that you feel like is an important thing that you wanted to highlight. So do you have anything that you possibly wanted to, discuss in greater detail in this moment?
I've got so much choice for them, but I know if you give them choice, they'll do nothing. So I feel that the first place for most people to start is to beyond loss. Okay. We all have so much loss in our life and we don't deep dive into it and we shove those emotions down. So, and in the Beyond Loss program, we do go into the emotions and everything as well. That's why I'm thinking Beyond Loss. We shove things down, and when we actually start to look at our life and who we are, so who we are today is a sum of our past experiences. They're all rolled up and they all came to who we are. But because we've never really dealt with our major loss events in our life, we've avoided them. And we, shove them down through those avoidance tactics. And that's probably why anger comes up, is because you haven't dealt with what has gone on in your past. So when you do actually deep dive into it, and it's not easy, but it's so rewarding. It's so rewarding because not only do you get to look back, but you also get to look forward. And you have this formula, you have this system of when loss comes again, and it will, because we have over 40 different loss events that will affect our lives. We know what to do. We may go down for a little while, but we won't go down and stay down. And that's the beauty of the Beyond Loss program, is it gives you that formula. I always think it would have been great if we had this formula at school. It would have been like that maths problem, that comes up 20 years later and you go, oh, what was that formula again? You go, oh yeah, that's right. And then you just follow the formula and it works out perfectly. And that's what this Beyond Loss program is about. And I honestly do believe it should be taught in schools. Would we value it? Maybe not, but at least we would have that resource to go back to. I feel that is the key. And that's leads into the all about you. It helps you to deep dive into you because your life begins with you. You are the only person you're going to spend your entire life with. No one else. No one else you spend 24/7 with. So the more you get to know yourself, the more you get to love yourself. And that's not from a vanity point of view. It's from I am a sovereign being and I deserve my love. I deserve to live this life to the best of my ability, not to just, cruise along and not achieve anything and then get to the end of my life and look back and go, oh, I regretted I didn't do that. I didn't have the courage to do that. I regretted not doing that. Or so-and-so stopped me from doing that. No, you stop yourself from achieving every single goal, every single thought that pops into your head you can create. But it is about you getting to know you and love you and come to a place where you can look in the mirror and do that old Fonzie salute. You know the Fonzie salute? Hey!
Hey!
Really, it is. It's that simple. And that's what I love about it.
That was lovely. Thank you. I didn't need to do a little bit of Fonzie.
No, I'm glad you did it.
I love it.
More people doing it. Imagine everyone in the world waking up in the morning, looking in the mirror and going, hey, so cool.
That's incredibly cool. And you know what? It brought joy to my heart. So thank you for that.
Oh, that's isn't that what everyone wants? That's joy moments every day.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I just want to say, Karen, thank you so much for joining us today. This has been a fantastic and lovely conversation. Always love being able to chat with you and learn more about your insights about everything. And for those of you watching at home or checking this out via LinkedIn or the FreeFuse platform, we just want to say thank you so much for taking the time to spend some time with us. We look forward to seeing you in the 4th session of the FreeFuse sessions. We'll see you soon.